thank you so much for joining me. This is very exciting. I've been waiting for 2026 to come because I knew this was on my calendar. Please introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me too. I am Nikki Fried. I am the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, as well as our last statewide elected Democrat here in the state of Florida, our past commissioner of agriculture, where I was elected in 2018 and sworn in 2019 to sit in the Florida cabinet alongside Ron DeSantis. So at some point when I have time to actually breathe, there'll be a book coming out about the behind the scenes of the Florida cabinet of the 2019 to 2022 23 year.
I cannot wait. Before we get into it, can you explain what a state party chair does? I think people get real confused about what different positions within the party
Yep.
actually do.
Absolutely. And every state party is a little bit different,
Hmm.
depending on if you have a blue state where you have a governor and a legislature and US senators. And the party is kind of there to just, keep the wheels running during the off season, to continuing checking in with electeds and party organizing on the ground versus when you are a chair of a state like Florida, where there are no statewide electeds, where we have been in a super minority now for the last couple of cycles. The work is very different, where we, as the party, and certainly what we're trying to build here in Florida, is that we are the center of gravity here in the state. And so everything from as chair, I hire a full staff. An executive director who does the day-to-day operations, and then I have a full staff that does communications and help hire all of them. But we are the center of gravity, and my job is to one, be the face of the party here in the state, and as we have no elected statewide, kind of be the face of Florida. The other aspects, which are much more not sexy, is call time every day to help raise the dollars, to help raise the resources to bring into the state, come up with a strategy of where, what is it, the strategy of your state look like? Everything from, are you trying to flip a seat? Are you trying to maintain a seat and hold on to it and come up with the actual strategy? So depending on, that's where it's a difference, whether some chairs are purely rah rah, do the speeches, raise the dollars, but it's the executive director that comes up with the strategy and the implementation of the strategy. I, having, been in elected office and also have a master's in campaigning and a law degree in practice law, I am much more hands-on on the strategy component of our state and everything from strategy of the field to the strategy of the communications. But we also, my job is to recruit candidates all the way from school board all the way up to governor, U.S. Senate, to be really leaning in all of my county parties, trainings for them, and then being able to really organize on the ground year round. It is a lot of work. It is a full time job. Some chairs get paid, some do not. Depending on the size of your state and the size of the party. And again, if you're in a blue state versus a red state, whether or not you get paid, that is a state by state decision, and by their own individual bylaws. And so that's a state party. And then and I report to the people of our state of Florida. And I am part of the DNC, which is the national party. And we have a national chair. I sit on the DNC, as every chair does, and you get a certain amount of votes per state. But I don't report to the DNC. We are an independent organization making decisions on our own. Now, granted, they may not like everything I have to say and do. And it may alter funding that comes in or surrogates that they bring down to the state. But we operate in a lot of ways independently. And then, of course, we've got the local county parties that do report directly to me, that I have oversight and control over.
That sounds easy.
And here in Florida, I always like to say I've got the second hardest job in American politics, only second to the DNC chair, living here in the state of Florida.
Yeah. So, what happened to Florida? And by which I mean, when I was up and coming, I'm 41. When I was like starting to pay attention to politics, Florida was a swing state. Every election was like, sure, Florida could go blue. That has not been true in recent memory. So what happened? Why did Florida go from being a swing state to being so solidly red?
It really started in 2000.
Mm.
The first time that we lost an election, the governor, decades and decades and decades and decades was to Jeb Bush in 1998. And Jeb at that time was a little bit of an outlier for Florida, as far as Republicans. He came from Miami, in regards to like the Miami population had shifted a little bit at that point, and he won Miami because he was a Miami boy. And so that was the first election that we lost. And what happened from that moment on is how we got to this moment. And so, kind of the full story is a little bit piecemealed, but realistically, what happened was we continued to lose these elections. And when you have a power shift in a power shift, that party in power makes significant changes to laws that makes it much more difficult to register voters, to take the microphones back, to organize, and then of course we had the 2000 hanging chads debacle, where it was, I think, 318 votes. So this is only 25 years ago. 318 votes decided the presidency, like the overall presidency. And then what started happening is that people kept investing significant dollars in Florida. And there was no accountability for when we kept losing, that there was no change. There was no, how are we doing things differently? And what happened on the Democratic Party side is that because we had been winning for so long, the party infrastructure wasn't there. You had
Mm.
the party, you had your electeds, but the year-round organizing, the party infrastructure, the supporting of our candidates, the year-round messaging just wasn't there. And so when we started to lose elections, there wasn't an ability to quickly rally back. And so we kept finding ourselves more and more in a ditch. And then you start having the national narrative of Florida's lost. And Florida, we cannot survive without resources coming into the state party. And I also make this very clear, commentary that people in Florida have, for many cycles, have felt that the way to win Florida is on TV. And that makes it really, really expensive. And so when you're talking about investing in Florida, and if you're only looking at it from a TV buy perspective, of course, we're going to be too expensive for you to be coming in from an underdog perspective. And so the money continued to dry up and not be invested properly. And then there was a lot of talent inside of Florida that ran campaigns that wanted to start winning. And so they left the state. And so we lost a lot of our talent. And what has remained here are the same consultants, the same people who have been doing things over and over again. And look, I am a triple gator for any of the people who are watching, and I will do not apologize for that, but I will apologize for our football season. And if our Gator football coach continued to lose, he gets replaced and he gets fired. Here in a democratic world, and people just get rehired, and the same mistakes get done over and over again. And at the same time, laws changed when DeSantis came in 2018. Since then, we have seen tremendous changes to voter registration laws that makes it financially tremendous to do partisan voter registration in the state of Florida. Democrats nationally took a lot of their financial resources since Obama and moved it away from the state parties that are doing that year-round work and voter registration and engagement, and put it to the individual expenditure side of things that has to do things in a nonpartisan way. So a lot of Democratic money went to independent expenditures to do voter registration, which is nonpartisan. And so you have 20 plus years of people knocking on doors, registering voters, and not carrying the Democratic brand and persuasion with them, and not caring if they register as Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, because they get paid regardless. And then they changed who becomes an active voter versus an inactive voter, and a lot of just gerrymandering of our districts that suppresses voters. And it's just everything on top of each other. And now we're in a super minority in both chambers with no statewide elected, and a very disfractured media, that it is hard for a Democrat to break through. Traditional media is not covering a lot of things that we are counterpointing on, not covering press conferences. And so it is exciting to talk to you, Amanda, because these outside, of mainstream media sources is how we're all going to get to people. They're not watching mainstream. They don't trust it anymore, and they want to hear trusted voices. And so, if you're able to get into that lane and provide resources to people to hear truthful information, that's what people are gravitating towards. And so, it makes it very difficult for us because of such fragmentation of media to be able to continue building coalitions. So it's going to have to be a good old sweat and tears and rolling it up and just doing the hard work.
Well, you had a big win recently in Miami, right, with the flip of the mayoral seat, and that's been a while since there's been a Democrat in that seat, right? So what do you attribute that to? And, like, what is your strategy statewide to take the state back? I know it's a small question.
No, what's the strategy here?
What are
So
you
yeah,
doing?
it's been 30 years since a Democrat won the mayor of Miami, which is insane. As a party chair, it is absolutely insane to know that we still to this day have a voter registration advantage in the city of Miami. Kamala Harris won the city of Miami, but the fact that we haven't won it in 30 years tells you the full story. The full story of the lack of organization on the ground in Miami and across the state from the party, inability to recruit good quality candidates to tell a story of why people should be voting for us. And so that really is what I look at is like, how in the world for 30 years did we just hand over such a tremendously impactful city that has impacts on a global perspective. And so what happened this cycle is, when I came in 23, I knew I had to stop the bleeding in the state party. The other problem that we've had here in Florida is that we continuously replace our chairs every 2 years. Because when you lose, who do you want to blame? You don't want to blame the candidate. You don't want to blame their consultants. You blame the party. And that had the least amount of say in the decisions that get done by a campaign. And so we oust our chairs every 2 years and start all over again with a new strategy. And I always make that comparison too that if you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and you're changing your CEO and your board of directors every 2 years, that company will eventually go bankrupt. And that's what's happened here in Florida. And so Miami have been, so 23 and 24 was stop the bleed, start building the foundation. And 24 and 25, we were really focused on launching what we're calling the pendulum program, which is year-round organizing statewide. Every part of our state has people on the ground, training our volunteers, recruiting more volunteers, getting those local parties up and operational, making sure they've got the tools for success. And that's what we were able to bring in Miami. We have a new chair down in Miami-Dade who is phenomenal. She's an immigration attorney, so she's a little busy right now too,
Yeah.
on her real life work. But we were able to organize on the ground year round in messaging. Then two, Eileen Higgins was a fantastic candidate. She had been, involved in local politics for many cycles at this point, was not a bomb thrower of partisan politics, talked about the issues that were important to the people of the city of Miami, didn't talk about DeSantis, didn't talk really about Trump, except for our neighbors are fearful right now. Our neighbors are fearful of ICE and what's going to be the impact of our local communities and our local businesses and our churches and our schools by the immigration czars. Outside of that, she was talking about Miami issues, talking about the pride of the city of Miami, and then you add in there, financial resources that she had access to, and that was the winning equation, and talking about issues that transcended partisan politics. And that's what got her Republican support, independent support. And that is truly the winning equation for all Democrats across not just Florida, but across the country.
So, I mean, it's okay. You can lift and shift a strategy like that, right, to a statewide race. You can't really do it nationally, though. I mean, Florida is I think, unique electorally. Your state has such interesting demographics. The southern part of the state, way different from the panhandle. So, how do you think about that? Like, because there are other states where that's similar. Texas has kind of similar demographics in some places too. But when you've got functionally like two different communities in one place, what is the thinking there in a statewide for the
Yeah,
statewide?
we are different than any other state. Any other state. My response to Venezuela had to be
Mm,
different than that potentially of somebody out of New York. because it doesn't have the same impact of the residents here in Florida. And so we kind of have to always take a step back and look at messaging, and fortunately for us and where you have me here to help with that, born and raised in Miami. So I understand the Miami culture, like the best of them. And then I lived in Broward County for 10 years. I went to the University of Florida, so I was in central part of our state, not only for 8 years for our undergrad and master's in law school, practiced law there for also 3 years. I've lived in Jacksonville. I've now lived in Tallahassee, and so I have the full breadth, and of obviously run statewide now twice, and now being chair of this party, I get to crisscross and be in every part of our communities. And what is interesting about Florida that there are nuances. Like the people in our panhandle don't understand why the Venezuela stuff is so important and why it's so impactful. But they also respect that those are Floridians and those people in Florida that are going to have an impact by the decisions that are getting made in Latin and Central America. But the reality is, Floridians love being Floridians.
Yeah.
And that there's just this pride and this understanding about our uniqueness, that you can go and hang out on Duval Street in Key West, and hang out and go to drag shows in Key West, but also like love and appreciate that the Daytona 500 and the International Speedway, and our farmers and ranchers, and that we're so close to Alabama. Like there's just so much on our springs and our waterways and our environment, and just the tourism and Disney. Like people love being a Floridian, and being part of being a Floridian is understanding the uniqueness of our state. But there's also a lot of things that really do unite us. If you want to, talk about offshore oil drilling, Floridians are going to connect regardless of a Democrat, Republican, Independent. No offshore oil drilling. That is a consensus, no matter the partisan politics. You go after the Everglades, that is a nonpartisan, we come together. So there are those things that really truly unite us on every aspect. And right now, the thing that's uniting most Floridians is an affordability crisis that is happening no matter where you live in our state. You can't afford your rent. You can't afford your electric bills. You can't afford to even think about buying a home if you are 35 and under, even 40 and under at this point. So there's so much that connects us. And as party chair, it is really important that when I make a statement or have the party make communication statements, that we really truly are encompassing the broadest of messaging of people to capture. And so we always, no matter if we're talking about Venezuela or we're talking about something that's happening in the panhandle that may not affect South Florida, or I'm talking about our farmers and our ranchers, we go back to always connecting the dots of how it impacts everybody, whether it is healthcare, whether it is general affordability, the cost of goods and services, the tourism impact impacts all of us, and making sure that I'm connecting those dots no matter what the issue is.
Is recruitment hard in a state as red as yours to find good people to run? No?
Now, yes and no. I mean, the reality is, when I got here, that was a mission that I had. I wanted to fill every seat, for
Yeah.
multiple reasons. One, because we had come out of a 22 cycle that was the worst election results of Florida Democrats in the history of Florida. Charlie Crist lost by 19 points. We lost down ballot races. We lost seats that should have never been lost. And so we knew that 23-24 was a really important cycle for us to show that that was an outlier, that that is not who Florida is today. And so in order to do that, I needed to recruit candidates that got people carrying the Democratic message, that were knocking on doors, were engaging with their communities, and so we did. We had a mission, and we did. We filled every seat. We filled every house and every seat, every House, Senate, and congressional seat in 2024, and it really showed that the muscle energy is there, and the muscle memory is going to take some time, but it's getting there, and it's really important. And we, in fact, had since 24. An increase of almost 500% of people who want to run for office. We have every one of our congressional seats already filled. Unfortunately, too many primaries. Um,
Yeah, it's a
and
lot.
it's a lot. And we are certainly working on filling the rest of our House and our Senate seats, school board races, local races, city and county commission races. People are frustrated. People are frustrated with what's happened in our state for 30 years. The Republicans have lured in millions upon millions of people with no growth management plan. People are having a scarcity of quality of water. The roads and construction the roads are packed. Construction is overbearing. You're taking ag and natural resources to build developments. Um, we're at capacity. And the people that are been here for generations or have moved here in the last 10 to 20 years are suffering because there hasn't been a plan. So people are frustrated and they want to stand up and fight back.
Gerrymandering. Is Florida I mean, I haven't seen any recent statements, but are y'all doing mid-district?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, we've got Ron DeSantis here and Donald Trump who lives down the street, so yeah, it started actually kind of here. When Trump came to visit uh, Alligator Alcatraz, another famous Florida thing now, there was a banter back and forth between Trump and DeSantis about Florida needing more seats. And me watching and knowing DeSantis as well as I know him at this point, I knew what that meant. And so they've been all over the place of first it was I need a new census and so that we can get more seats, which that's not legally possible before 26. But they certainly are playing. We have seen the House right now has done a special committee and they are moving forward on drawing maps. The Senate has held for a moment just because DeSantis has held, saying that we're waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to rule on those Louisiana cases and unfortunately potentially dismantle the Voting Rights Act on the second section, which is the protection of our minority access districts. Because in Florida, we have something interesting that most states don't have. In our Constitution, we passed what was called fair districts in 2010, which meant that no politician, no party can draw lines to favor one politician or one party. So without new data and without something that triggers it from the US Supreme Court, they will have a really hard argument to make to redraw lines. So they need something else to trigger this. And so that's why they have to wait for the Supreme Court. And certainly, if the Supreme Court case comes down sooner than later, we'll be in a redistricting fight here in Florida.
What kind of advice do you have for, like, blue dots in red states? People who feel kind of isolated, don't really know how to get involved, surrounded by Republicans. What do you tell voters?
Well, there's a couple things. Like, first of all, you are not alone by any stretch of imagination. Every county has more blue dots than you think. So, one is get out of your bubble. There's plenty of Democrats and like minded people. The other thing is that things are changing. We're hearing the stories of people taking down their MAGA or Trump flags. We are hearing people willing to have more conversations. And the way I always address this, especially if I'm going into a red area or hostile territory, I always kind of let down my guard and I started having conversations about things that unite us. And I'll give you a perfect example. We started last year, what we're calling the front porch swing, where I am crisscrossing our state, going to rural and ag and red areas, just having conversations. And there was one guy out of Clay County, which is a very red county in Florida. It's a little further south of Jacksonville, pretty red, pretty rural, pretty ag. And this guy who had been a fifth generation horse farmer, my team had reached out to him and said, the chair would like to come out and talk to you and some of your neighbors about what's on your mind. And so went out to his farm. He comes out of his house and he said, listen, Nikki, I really wasn't up for this first, that to have you out here. And as I'm driving down the dirt road, I got on my left hand side, I got the Confederate flags. On the right hand side, I got the Trump flags. I kind of knew where I was going. And he said, but you know what? He's like, I remember when you were commissioner of agriculture, you fought for, and this isn't something else that's unique to Florida, that the commissioner of agriculture oversaw the concealed weapons program. Uh,
Oh,
yep, welcome to Florida,
yeah.
which is not necessary anymore because we just went to open carry. So that's another whole thing. And he said, but I remember when you were commissioner of agriculture, you fought for my gun rights as a cannabis user. And he's like, so I thought it was okay for you to come. And we spent 2 hours on horseback with a lot of his friends around the neighborhood, and we got off and kept talking about things and us, and they're like, property insurance, and we're talking about just things that, again, that connect us. And at the end of the meeting, he says, "I just want to let you know, my family's been here for 5 generations. You are the first person who's ever come out here and asked me how I am, Democrat or Republican." And I
Mm.
think that people are been so in their own lanes and corners that they're not willing to understand we're still humans. We're all going through shit. We all have family baggage. We all have to, pay our credit cards at the end of a month. And that there's just a lot more that unites us. Get off the cell phone, get off the algorithm, and just talk. Talk about things, talk about the weather, talk about, you're going out, you picking this weekend with the kids. You talk about things that a human being would connect on. And that's one. Two, there's always opportunities. We have local party chapters in every one of our counties. So there's ways to get involved at that front. And so there we are, we are red, but we are just been under organized. We've got 3.4 million independents here in our state, which is almost equivalent, almost a third, a third, a third, which is why I say that we are by far not even close to being lost. Is a matter of getting good candidates, making sure we're organizing on the ground year round, and making sure we've got the financial resources and spending them properly on the ground, not on the air.
That's all great. I do think I hear a lot from people in my audience who are quite angry right now, and they blame Trump voters that, we should don't talk to them, cut them off, never speak to them again, never forgive them, and all that. And I understand where that's coming from, but that does feel like blue state privilege to me. Because if you're in a red state or a purple state, I'm in Virginia. We've not always been a blue state. And if we had had that attitude here, we never would have become a purple state. So
That's
I
right.
don't think.
And we all have family, that made decisions, for whether, for various different reasons, and I do see I'm Jewish, and I know that a lot of my, you know, friends and acquaintances and that I've grown up with, decided to vote for Donald Trump because of Israel policies. And now we're seeing, that the economic and domestic policies blow up in our faces and are starting to kind of, think twice too again. So again, if we've completely shut the door on, 50% of the American population, we can't build a coalition. And I think that there's a lot of people right now that are really watching what's happening globally, what's happening domestically, uh, that their prices are going up across the board, they, losing their jobs, just complete instability that we have right now. This is a time when we got to connect again. We got to open up the door, be willing to have the conversations, that I told you so's. I don't care if it's a husband, a wife, if it's a whoever it is, you never like being that is never a good way to have a conversation. And it's really going to be important for us to keep the doors open and make sure that we're all talking.
Okay, one more. It's an important question. I get this all the time in Virginia. Is Florida the South? Oh, you're breaking up. Hold on.
I get that as I've had a different answer to that in my life. So when I was living in Miami, I used to say that we were the sixth borough of New York, and felt very strongly that that my grandparents, my great grandparents, everybody came from New York. We were definitely the sixth borough of New York. And then as I kind of again grew up and went to Gainesville and University of Florida, which is definitely much more of an SEC Southern school. What is SEC? So it's a much more of a Southern school. Started learning a little bit more about, when I had date functions at KA where where you have the cannon still in front of the house, and Old South is the date function. And I walk into my date's house and there's a Confederate flag on his ceiling. And you drive through definitely parts of Florida, and when we talking about the DNC, I am in the southern region. So they categorize us as the South. And when I like to talk to, and all of our Southern chairs, we all talk, God, multiple times the course of the day. Because what I like to say is, messaging from the North and from the West don't work in the South. We we talk differently, y'all. We drink differently. Our bourbon is like gold, and how we drink our bourbon. We talk about guns differently. SEC football is a religion, and so you have to, and we definitely eat differently. Like boiled peanuts in the North, they have no idea about boiled peanuts. And so there are definitely, I consider, I always used to think, well, were we part of the Confederacy? Well, Civil War didn't technically come, but yes and no. But yeah, we're the South.
I agree. Thank you for confirming. I'm gonna just, like, keep that as a clip on my desk when people argue with me about what the South is, because I get Virginia's not the South, and I'm like, "That doesn't make any sense." And then people say the same thing about Florida, doesn't make any sense. Okay, well, on that note, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, I will tag you in all the things when
Uh,
this goes out.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is such a great series, talking about the state parties, because we're the ones who do the work all year round. We're the ones that if we, I keep telling people, if you throw money at candidates, it's going to consultants that don't care at the end of the day if they win or lose an election. But the state parties are the ones who are every day waking up, reading the news headlines, having to react to it, having to position their house, their states to win elections. And so reinvesting in the state parties in this moment is really going to be how we get out of this mess, and being able to do the work year round, the door knocking, the phone banking, the communications with our communities. This is how we get out of this mess, and as a country, is by investing and keeping close tabs on what especially our Southern party chairs, they're all ballers, and are good people who understand that, with a new South becomes a new democracy for our nation.
Man, what a word. Alright. Well, you have a great rest of your
You
day.
too. Thank you. Bye.